to be back for our third Black and Neuro Week. My name is Ashley Cunningham, and I'm an incoming third-year neuroscience PhD student at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And we're so excited to have you here for Black and Neuro Week. I'm also a co-founder of Black and Neuro, and I act as the manager of the Black and Neuro merch. So in terms of accessibility, we have a live captioning option. And so to see this, you are just going to hit the live or the closed captioning live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. We also have a live interpreter here. And to adjust the size of the font, you can click on the three dots at the bottom of your window that say more and select the subtitle setting. Our sign language interpreter here today is Vidium, and they should appear as a panelist on your screen. And if you're experiencing any issues accessing the captions or the interpretations, please message all the panelists and we will make sure that we address that. So to start, we want to thank our conference sponsors. This includes the Allen Brain Institute, Wu Tsai Neuroscience Institute of Stanford, the University of Minnesota Department of Neuroscience, and the Medical Discovery Team on Addiction and Alzheimer's Research Association, and many other more. Without this support, these events would not be possible, and we would not be able to compensate all of our speakers, which is very important, and a very important initiative for Black and Neuro. So if you were unable to attend any of the sessions during Black and Neuro Week, I just want to remind you that you can access any of these sessions via our YouTube page, and all of the events from today, the previous events of the week, and the upcoming events that we have will be accessible there indefinitely. So just to give you an overview of the day, we have already released our first live chat with Dr. Dr. Paul, and that was aired at 12 p.m. Eastern time, and it's available on our YouTube channel currently. So we highly recommend that you go to this link and check out the great gems that Dr. Paul dropped on his experience as an HBCU graduate and how his experiences have impacted his journey to neuro and his mentorship style. Additionally, if you want to share any highlights from what you've learned today or what you hear today on social media, you can do so using the hashtag BINW22 or 22, like the numbers, and the hashtag Black Journey to Neuro hashtag. And we highly recommend that all of the members of the Black and Neuro community share their unique journeys to neuro. So this day is not only meant to highlight Black and Neuro members who graduated from HBCUs, but all members of the community. And I'd also like to add that we currently have 10% off all of our merchandise on our Etsy store, and we will drop the link here in the chat so that you can access that discount. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Manhattan, a borough of New York City, the lands of the first people. There's a myth that the Dutch purchased Manhattan Island from the Lenape people in 1626, which created a forced migration from their homeland. As we know, Western history rarely recognized the true stories of Indigenous people that were brutally removed from their ancestral lands. The Lenapes are the true native New Yorkers, and after nearly 400 years deserve to reclaim their land. We are all joining this event event from different places around the world, and I would invite you all and encourage you all to take a moment and reflect on the land you are joining from, as well as your relationship with those lands and the Indigenous people who have continued and will continue to inhabit them. So today's panel will focus on sharing the stories of HBCU graduates who are part of the Black and Neuro community, and we're so excited to have them. They all have diverse pathways to neuroscience, and today we'll be highlighting their transitions in their journey and how attending an HBCU has changed their trajectory in their career development. So I will quickly share my screen so that I can introduce a little bit of history on HBCUs. So again, as an overview, today you're joining the Black Journey to Neuro HBCU panel, and I wanted to give you, or some of you that may not know a lot about the history of HBCUs in America. So HBCU stands for historically Black colleges or universities in the United States, and they were established with the intention of serving African-American communities in the United States. So as of 2020, there are 101 HBCUs in 19 states, including the District of Columbia and the Virgin Islands. And statistics have shown that 25% of African-American graduates with STEM degrees come from HBCUs. And currently, when we think about the context of HBCUs with Black and Neuro, currently there's only one HBCU that offers an undergraduate level neuroscience program. And this university is Xavier University. And so while we know that HBCUs may produce 100% excellence from their graduates, they receive a small level or a disproportionate level of funding compared to PWIs, or predominantly white institutions. And the NIH has published a number of studies that suggest that HBCUs only receive about 1% of NIH funding. So this kind of highlights the importance of HBCUs. HBCUs are offering a very unique perspective to their students and are offering and lending to the field a number of diverse individuals that can overall help us increase the diversity and therefore how we think about neuroscience. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So today we have Trayvon Giles, who will, all of the panelists will introduce themselves shortly. We have Janelle Johnson, and we have Kayla Miles. So if you guys would like to introduce yourselves, we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, I can kick off the introductions. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Kayla Miles. I will take a moment to just describe myself. I am a Black woman wearing glasses today, and I have very, very short hair. Hopefully one day I will have waves. So I am currently the Learning Impact Fellow at the Federation of American Scientists. I'm doing a tour of service at the Institute for Education Sciences, which is within the Department of Education. I am extremely excited to be here today. It is honestly beautiful to see the number of Black neuroscientists growing. And special shout out to Paige for inviting me today. Thank you so much.
Hello, I am Trayvon Giles. I am a second-year PhD student at the Icahn School of Medicine. I'm a Black man, also wearing glasses, and also has short hair, a little waves. I graduated undergrad from Morehouse College, and I'm excited to be here. And thank you for inviting me, Ashley.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. My name is Janelle Johnson, and I am a rising senior biology major, chemistry psychology double minor at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I am a Black woman with fairly long hair, not wearing glasses. But I'm also a proud member of the BIN organizing team. I am the Black in Neuro co-lead for chapters, which is a new initiative coming very, very soon. And I am very happy to be here. Nice to meet all of you.
Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. I will actually also describe myself. I am an African-American woman. I'm wearing long braids and I'm wearing my I am Black in Neuro merch, which again, everyone should go ahead and get. So I guess we'll go ahead and start off with some questions for the panelists. I guess we want to start off with, why did you choose to go to an HBCU? What informed that decision?
So I feel like it wasn't necessarily a decision that I had to make. It was just something I feel like I knew for like my lifetime. I had family members that had attended HBCUs, and their experience of sort of growing community and being able to learn from people that look like you, as well as like navigate classes with people that look like you, just seemed to be like a really great idea. Also, the idea of not having to code switch, I don't think that's what I was calling it, like back when I was in school. But just the idea that I could comfortably learn in an environment and not have to worry about adjusting the way that I communicate, knowing that my instructors would have a good idea of like where I came from, my upbringing, and sort of being able to bring that into instruction, especially like learning science, which is already like a pretty complex and difficult to begin with. I think that's sort of what motivated my decision. I went to Oakwood University, which is a small HBCU in Huntsville, Alabama. We are small, but we are mighty. I honestly had like a great time, even though I spent the majority of my time as a biology major in my room studying, but it was still an experience that I will never regret and am extremely grateful for.
For me, I didn't have anyone in my family that attended an HBCU. So part of it was wanting to kind of start that tradition moving forward. The other half of it, I actually experienced going to Hampton's homecoming and being around so many different people and all the experiences there was what really motivated me. But I also, through that experience, I was able to identify that I didn't have a lot of Black teachers growing up in middle school and high school. And I wanted to be able to change that. So that, on top of meeting a Morehouse man and him showing me and telling me about the culture and history of it, is what motivated me.
For me, I had a similar experience. I'm the first in my family to go to college, so it was really important for me to choose a college that would align with my goals of creating excellence, not only academically, but also culturally. And I feel like Howard University, and being in Washington, D.C., which is known for being the chocolate city, I would have a affluent amount of Black individuals who would be able to mentor me and guide me and support me through my journey.
That's amazing. For me personally, I didn't have anyone in my family that went to HBCUs. So it's really great to hear that all of you sought out spaces where you could get a great education, but also be surrounded by people that look like you. And with that, I kind of want to ask, how has going to an HBCU changed or impacted how you interact in predominantly white spaces, specifically the predominantly white space of academia?
I really like this question because I don't think it's something that I truly considered. How skillful I am at communicating, and I really attribute that to my institution, and one, being able to learn science in a comfortable environment really promotes curiosity and like the ability to ask questions without thinking that like you're a fool. And honestly, in science, that's literally what we show up to do on a daily basis, is to, at least for me, I showed up to get played every day by my research. But with that, I had to ask questions, and I had to be comfortable in knowing that I don't have the answer, but the purpose of research is to seek out and find the answer. So I think for me, going to an HBCU really taught me how to communicate a question, and to do so boldly. Because I found in the undergraduate or the graduate level courses that I was taking, a lot of my peers were a little quiet, I think, during instruction, or their questions would more so come during study groups or study sessions. But by that time, all of us are, seeking to find the answer. No one has the one true answer. So I think it really helped me just in like the first 2 years of grad school, just being able to ask questions confidently, and, being okay with the fact that, yeah, I don't know the answer, but the whole point of the PhD is to find the answer eventually at some point. So one, I will say communication. Two, I would say it sort of empowered like my sense of identity. And I think that's extremely important, coming from or going to a PWI and having to sort of like adjust to the fact that, not everyone has seen someone that looks like me in this space, and having to not only I feel like I had to convince people in the building that I was where I was supposed to be. And I don't think I would have had the wherewithal to do that so eloquently had it not been for my HBCU experience.
Yeah, definitely the experience helps set a strong scientific foundation, but also a strong identity of being able to identify with yourself and then who you are as a scientist. And I think sometimes in the current spaces that we exist, the lines get so blurred that it's hard for us to sometimes be able to break those apart. And that shows in the classroom, kind of like what you said, and being able to be outspoken because or you've come from an environment where you were cultivated to do that. And that extends to being able to find mentors or being able to directly communicate your needs or your wants sometimes. And so there are moments where even I still like fall back on some of those things. And I have to remember the principles that were instilled upon me from those that helped mentor and train me. But overall, I think it set me on a good scientific foundation in terms of knowledge, but then also in terms of how I want to view myself and how I want my science to come across.
Definitely to piggyback off of what was said, advocacy is really important because I grew up in an environment that was a predominantly white space and I went to predominantly white institutions. And it almost felt as if sometimes I dared to speak up. And when you're the minority in the room, your voice can almost get drowned out. So coming to an HBCU and learning from these individuals, I learned that I can dare to speak up for myself and that I deserve to be here, especially since I am a first generation student. It's kind of a trial and error process for me. So going through, I'm able to understand that I have a place in academia, I have a place in science, and keep moving forward.
I love that. It sounds like you all have taken away something very similar from attending your different HBCUs, which is that you have learned to speak up for yourself, advocate for yourself, take up space in the predominantly white spaces that we exist in. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. So I guess I'm wondering, well, my next question would be, if you all have had experience mentoring, how has going to an HBCU informed your mentorship style? You can answer in any order also.
As far as like mentoring, I think I'll actually start off with a bit of a negative and then sort of like turn it around. I think that going to an HBCU and sort of being conditioned in like a familial environment, you kind of want to hold on to mentors. And I think at the very root, mentors or the mentor-mentee relationship is really supposed to build out a skill. And oftentimes you don't necessarily have to maintain those relationships like moving forward. So I think for me going into grad school, it was difficult to identify like skills in people that I just wanted to learn because I was so worried about trying to cultivate like a familiar relationship. And sometimes in like a scientific environment, that's not really necessary. I shouldn't be necessarily trying to have lunch or lunch with whoever's trying to teach me how to do like a seahorse experiment. That's not necessarily like necessary. So sort of I felt like the HBCU mentor-mentee relationship was a little, I definitely have to like make adjustments to how I sought out mentors at the grad school level, just because at that point I was only really concerned with building my technical skills. Whereas you know, although I was able to identify mentors that I was able to gain like a closer personal relationship with, and they definitely helped me with both navigating like conflicts in my lab. But there were a lot of times where I feel like I missed out on some mentor-mentee relationships because I feel like I couldn't necessarily connect with them on a cultural level. When I should have been striving to connect with them to gain technical expertise. So it's kind of like, you know, it definitely requires you to, I think, compartmentalize a bit more. But I think regardless, having the experience of mentorship at my HBCU did definitely teach me what like a top tier, like all around mentor looks like, as far as someone that I can share both my personal passions as well as like my career goals. But I think at the graduate school level, and as you like move on into careers, there are a lot of people that you are definitely going to want to maintain just a strictly professional relationship with, and it can be difficult. At least it was for me, because I was so caught up on like, why don't we like do lunch? Why don't we get coffee or, you know, happy hour or something? But it wasn't really about that. It was more so, what technical expertise do I need from this person? And then in that very same vein, like how can I make myself available to provide a future service for them, whether it be helping write a grant or, you know, helping with a white paper or something like that.
I think on the other end of that spectrum, one of the things mentorship at an HBCU taught me is it's never too early to start mentoring people. So I think before I got to grad school, I kind of had this mindset that I had to accomplish certain things before I could begin to like mentor other people. And then once I got here and realized that the difficulties that were just explained on finding a mentor, I can't imagine what, you know, some other people might feel like that weren't in the positions or opportunities that I was afforded. And so I really took it upon myself to try to find avenues to mentor other people and kind of be the mentor that I wanted to seek out in the space that I was in. And I realized that as I began to kind of create the environment or energy that I was looking for other people, that same was returned to me by other mentors that were either moved by what I did or wanted to get involved, or sometimes the people that I was mentoring were able to inspire certain things in me. So I would say on one end, the mentorship style does change in graduate school, but at that same token, you can also bring a new flavor to that environment that you're coming into with what you've learned at your HBCU.
I'm definitely learning so much, by the way, about graduate school. Haven't gotten there yet, but I am a mentor to younger high school students who are looking to get into college. And one thing that I can say about my HBCU is that it's taught me to branch out of my comfort zone. And I feel that a lot of younger, particularly Black students, that's who I mentor, they feel the need to stay close and stay very familiar to what they know and not necessarily dare to venture out. So my mentorship style has changed in that regard, where I do encourage them to go for something that may not be necessarily the standard and what opportunities that you were afforded, and go further. And in terms of mentors that I've seeked out, you can gain mentorship for anyone. And I say that because the worst thing they can say is no. And that's where I've kind of worked my way in terms of science and getting an academic mentor, getting a PI, and going forward. question.
Sorry about that. Sorry. I love that we got a little bit about the positives of your experiences having mentors from HBCU backgrounds and having, you know, the negatives as well, because I think that's what we experience in the mentorship that we receive from people, and also we learn a lot along the way, as Janelle said. So my next question is based on the fact that many HBCUs do not have neuroscience programs or majors. And I guess I'm wondering how that may have impacted your journey to neuro, your Black journey to neuro, and how you think maybe changing that may be important to the neuroscience field overall, and also the BIN community.
So I went to, of course, a HBCU that doesn't have a neuroscience program, but we did have neuroscience labs and a few professors that were in neuroscience. So I really clung on to them, and they were able to teach me or prepare me for outside research experiences in which I could learn neuroscience. So that is how my school dealt with it, and kind of how they're still dealing with it, and why that now that I'm in a position to help run like a summer research program, I really put an emphasis on recruiting students from HBCUs so that I can kind of pay that forward. But I wouldn't have made it to where I'm at now in terms of being in a PhD program if it wasn't for these like outside summer research or short-term research experiences that I've had, and those PIs that were able to not only identify that I'm in an environment or institution that doesn't have the resources to provide what I need, but also be willing to provide those with me, with the knowledge of knowing that I might not, you know, come to their lab or stay with them long term. And as we were talking about mentorship, I still interact with a lot of them today for those reasons. So I think it has to be addressed on a systematic level, first with funding, because any of the changes that are going to be made, if the funding isn't there to support them, they can't stay long term. And we've seen that with some of the short term programs or grants that have occurred between like individual institutions. But I think as a whole, with the Black and Neuro movement and all these other movements that are coming, like we can actually make a change towards doing some of this stuff.
The HBCU that I went to definitely did not have a neuroscience like track or program at the time. I think now they do actually. There is like a specific like neuroscience track. So I think that that is amazing to see just growth within the department that I was at. But I think for me, it came with like a lot of supplemental like research and being really intentional about how how diverse my summer research was when I was in undergrad. So any opportunity that I had, although I was not placed with like a neuroscience PI, there were like, I think, different components or different branches of neuroscience that I could sort of infuse into my projects. Like how, albeit like they were like really small. And I think by the time that I went to apply to like a neuroscience graduate program, it was still like something that was very abstract, or it just seemed sort of intangible, just because I hadn't had like that direct lab experience. But sort of, I think being able to infuse those concepts with the research that I was doing, because I ended up doing behavioral neuroscience and just sort of seeing the role that animal research plays in like behavioral neuroscience. So just, I think at the foundation, being able to understand sort of those concepts was extremely helpful. I definitely agree with Trayvon in that, you know, it needs to be sort of systematic, and it definitely needs to begin with funding. And I just sort of like love the idea of paying it forward by, you know, advocating for like more HBCU students. That was a huge driver at my school for me, just being able to have summer research programs in general. So I definitely, it's good to sort of acknowledge and to see that programs are, you know, listening to students like us, to people like us, and that they are doing what they can to recruit more people of color to these research roles.
I feel that awareness is very important and acknowledging the fact that there is a community of Black individuals who are interested in neuroscience. And being at the undergraduate level, my HBCU does not have a neuroscience program. So it's been a very find your way experience of gathering different mentors and summer programs that I've applied to that can expose me to neuroscience. As it was already said, it's definitely a systematic level in terms of funding and getting funding to not only HBCUs, but neuroscience programs specifically. But I think that's why it's also important to build community and why I joined Black in Neuro in the first place, to find a community of like-minded individuals who are interested in neuroscience and just as passionate about it so that I can learn more and continue to grow every day in this discipline and find out where I would possibly want to pursue. And that's where I pay it forward in terms of where I mentor or how I mentor students, and even just exposing people who are maybe not in academia or not in industry to neuroscience. I had to tell my family what I did or like what I plan to do. It's something that's not really talked about in my community. And I'm sure that's something for a lot of people who may not really fully understand what neuroscience is and how it fits into our everyday society in different areas. So I think that the most important thing is definitely just acknowledging that there is a community here to be built upon.
That's amazing. I really love this concept of paying it forward. You each have already dropped so many gems for us. We're all learning so much, not just those who are joining us here, but also it's clear that the panelists hopefully are learning something too. So each of you have kind of touched on this, but I kind of want to hear a little bit more, and I think the audience would also benefit from hearing a little bit more about your journeys into neuroscience. We've kind of touched on, how you have all kind of navigated not having, or when you were in your HBCUs, not having neuroscience tracks. And I guess I'm wondering, how would you describe your HBCU journey to neuro? And specifically kind of touching on how mentors may have really been important in that journey.
So I definitely love this question because for me, it is a very colorful story because I got my PhD from the University of Cincinnati. And when they came to our school to recruit, I was asleep in my dorm between classes. And had it not been for one of my mentors who called me to like wake me up to get me to like get dressed and come down and like do a mock interview, then I would not have been given this opportunity. So I am extremely appreciative that she was able to stir me from my nap and sort of get me down there. And it turned out to be like a really great interview. At the time, I was extremely concerned that my GRE scores were not where they should be, as I'm sure like a lot of people, struggle with that as well. But like speaking with the recruiter, we had a great conversation, made a great connection. I had not previously considered a track in neuroscience at the time. I think then I was more so focused on doing something to do with like medicine, or something that was going to be sort of like less wet lab research. But when she sort of discussed the options, I was like, this is definitely something that sounds like it would fit. I think from there, just going through like the entire interview process and knowing that I could rely on my mentors and my professors at my HBCU, as well as peer mentors. And I think I'll like pause there and just like sort of celebrate my peers for, helping me with like mock interview questions, helping me prepare my application, whether or not like we just set aside time to knock out applications together. All of those things. So just sort of speaking to like, just the role that peer mentors play, not only in just sort of, encouraging you, but they, as I think, as Ashley just said, like we are learning a lot from each other just because we are a community of like-minded people. So I definitely, I have to shout out like my peer mentors who just, all turned out to be like really close friends and their role in just helping me get through the application process and continuing to encourage me when I was getting, rejection letters from other institutions. Because again, I definitely didn't ask to be a first, like neuroscience PhD graduate at the school. I don't even think I knew until like 2 years in. But had it not been for the community that I was able to select for myself and to build up, I definitely wouldn't have gotten that far. So I think peer mentors definitely play a huge role in, us navigating and overcoming.
As for me, I had some teachers and mentors at Morehouse that got me involved in research freshman year, and I just continued to do that throughout the year. I ended up becoming a Mark Scholar, which allowed for funding to be applied to my academic research, but also for me to go to summer research opportunities. And so it was through those opportunities that I really became interested in neuroscience, but I still had no real idea of what it felt like or meant to go to grad school, what the purpose of getting your PhD in neuroscience was and what you could do with that. I ended up coming to Mount Sinai for 2 summer research experiences. And through those experiences, I kind of learned more about what it meant to be a graduate student and kind of what I was getting myself into. And it felt right to me. So I still interacted with my mentors and my family and people that were close to me to figure out if this is the right path, because one of the things that's unique, I guess, to my experience is that the program I was in, it allowed me to apply to the PhD program while I was still an undergrad. So I kind of had to make the decision very early on if I wanted to commit to one school that I knew was willing to say yes to me, or if I wanted to roll the dice and go to another program or what I was really interested in. And because my experiences were so limited, I had to really gauge what my experiences were at Sinai to figure out if I could see myself actually getting a PhD here. And so to kind of address that, I took a gap year to think about that and to experience new things. And in that gap year, I did another short-term research experience in Baltimore, and it was a great lab, great experience, great mentor, and it helped me kind of get my bearings on what I really want to see for myself in terms of my science and the environment or institution I want around me. And so I took the gamble and I accepted, to come to Sinai early, finished my last year at Morehouse, and I'm here now and I've hit the ground running since, and I'm happy to be in the community that I have here and be able to still cultivate a new community and see, new recruits come in and be a part of this community as well. So my journey is unique, but I know similar people that have been on similar journeys, and everyone's journey is important at the end of the day. So.
My journey to Neuro has been a shorter but very fruitful one. I'm still an undergrad, so my journey, I originally am a pre-med student and I plan to go to medical school. That's part of the goal. But when it came to neuroscience, it kind of stumbled in my lap. That's the best way to explain it. I've always had an interest in the brain and how we think, memory. I have a few personal connections to things like Alzheimer's disease in my family and friends. So going into college, I had to make a decision, and I think this is where my HBCU and my connection to neuroscience kind of blend, because as I was going through the college application process, there were some institutions that offered neuroscience programs, and then there were some institutions that didn't. So I had to make a decision, well, what is more important to me at the moment? And I decided I wanted to start my undergraduate journey at a place where I felt comfortable and that valued not only intellectual curiosity, but also cultural diversity. So I ended up at an HBCU. But through that decision, I made the best decision I could with my mentors, because I ended up getting to do a summer research experience at University of Pennsylvania's Perelman School of Medicine, where I got my first real introduction to neuroscience and got to study blood-brain barriers and TBIs, and I absolutely fell in love with it over the course of time. So even though I'd never considered research, I'm now on a MD PhD track, which is something else. But at the end of the day, my journey to neuro has been a very flexible one. And I think something that's been very important to me was finding a community that can help support my journey and support my lifestyle that I want going forward. So coming and joining BIN and joining different scholarship groups that I'm a part of, and even just finding like my PI was so important to me because I knew that they would be with me through every step of the way. So I definitely empathize with peer mentors as well, because my friends are some of the strongest people who have encouraged me throughout this journey, where even though we're not in the same disciplines, they understand that it's important to have a group of people who really support you. And that's where I've been. So my journey has been short, but I am excited for everything that's to come.
That's amazing. I love that multiple of you have touched on peer mentors. During our one-on-one conversation with Dr. Paul, which we published on our YouTube video, our YouTube channel earlier today, he also mentioned the importance of peer mentors as something that, you know, is kind of like not really spoken about, but is super important in navigating neuroscience and science overall. So I wanted to ask a question. This will probably be one of our last questions that we have pre-planned, and we'll move on to audience questions after this. But my question is, microaggressions and overt macroaggressions are unfortunately common for Black students at PWIs. What advice would you have for students experiencing these for the first time? And potentially, how do you navigate these situations yourself?
So I think the one thing that brought me like a little bit of comfort is like I knew they were coming. And if you know something is coming, then you can create a plan in advance, not saying that you're going to be like fully prepared for or that you'll have a response. But I know for me, because I knew that eventually they would come, I made sure I established like a group chat. I had a dedicated, two things. I did two things for my first year of grad school. One, which was had a group chat that I could fully express myself in. Two, I had like a physical like safe space that I could go to and sort of like reset. Because again, unfortunately for us, like it's we're not really permitted to be reactive without being sort of like methodical in how we react. And there are definitely people that push back against I think the approach that I'm about to go through. But I think for me, it was important for me to find space to sort of think before I speak, and then identify who I was going to communicate this to so I could see like changes. So for me, that looked like building a rapport with my program director, and building a rapport with other tenure level scientists that could really advocate, again, for my work as a scientist and for, whatever situation I was bringing to them. I think oftentimes too, I had to acknowledge that a scientist can be just rude in general. And sometimes that may have very little to do with my race. So I had to sort of acknowledge that too, because I think that because I'm so accustomed to microaggressions and overt racism, that was honestly oftentimes my first choice, whereas I wasn't really considering the whole person who I was talking to. Like if I'm talking to a scientist who has dealt with multiple rejections, multiple paper rejections, or what have you, there may be times that they are short and curt with me, and that has nothing to do with my science. Not saying that happens 100% of the time, but it's definitely something to consider, because honestly, it saved me added stress and anxiety for always trying to insert how I had to navigate being a Black woman in these spaces. And it's honestly a concept that I learned from a mentor. And she would probably laugh at me hearing me say this now, because at the time I would just be like, no, girl, like they did this specifically because I'm Black. And honestly, no, it really could just be it's grant season and they ain't got time for nobody. So again, those are again, as things to consider, the two main things for me was making sure I had a outlet of friends that I could communicate myself openly with. Like I had friends that, you know, could say to me like, yeah, we can ride out at any time. Appreciate you, love you. And then having like a physical space in which I could sort of like reset and like center and remind myself of like my purpose. Like their comments are not going to detract me from, you know, and they did not detract me from, you know, gaining the 3 letters behind my name. So yeah.
I will say, kind of to extend on that, I think one of the things I learned very quickly is one that people that often have these microaggressions sometimes are just exerting themselves outwards, and it's really of their own internal conflict and less to do with you. But secondly, on that same token, especially when I got to grad school, that I learned I had to be able to address it directly and upfront when it happened. And that experience may be specific to me, like it may not work for everyone else, and there may be their own internal things that go on. But from my perspective, I learned that if I'm able to say, hey, I don't appreciate this, or hey, this is not okay, or set a certain standard, people are willing to follow it. And I learned that when they're not, a lot of times that isn't your direct battle to fight. You have to, you know, work with, I don't even want to say within the system, but be able to find those mentors or people that can advocate for you on a level, and show why this is an issue, not just directly to you, but to impact, you know, all trainees or all people or all experiences. And so you have to be able to be willing to do that, but also be willing to know when the allosteric load is too much, and knowing that at the end of the day, we're all here for our experiences and our science, and we individually can't change the system by fighting this battle alone. So we have to have strength in numbers. And in some institutions, you know, there aren't a lot of people that look like us. So that means sometimes you have to recruit from the other side. But at the end of the day, being able to advocate for yourself, never not advocating for yourself, and then finding people that could advocate for you, is going to be fundamental to kind of moving or changing this process.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what was said. I think it's the age-old thing of you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. And I often found myself in these situations where I felt the need to like, oh, but they did this, but they did that. And I think it's also very important to acknowledge the fact that it's not your job to teach people how to treat somebody. And I feel like there's this like level of, I don't know how to put it, but level of understanding that because I'm Black, I'm going to tell you why this was wrong, why you shouldn't tell me. And I had to really step back and evaluate myself, like, why do I feel the need to teach them why I should be treated a certain way? Why can't my actions speak for themselves? And stepping back and really evaluating that, of course, acknowledging it is equally as important and making sure, but also understanding that I can only do what's within my bounds, and I should use those type of tactics and use them as fuel to be better and greater, and go to be the best that I can be in those situations.
That was really impactful. I feel like all of you touched a little bit on the importance of having some kind of community where you are, so that you have someone or a group of people to lean on when you experience these kinds of macro aggressions. This is kind of a question from the audience, building on that a little bit. It is so great to see the importance of these summer programs that have helped students at HBCUs expand their research repertoire. What can Black faculty at PWIs do to facilitate these types of exposure outside of these programs? And in terms of, you know, the few Black and Neuro community members that are faculty members that we have so far, as we're recruiting, you know, and reaching more people, what can they do to increase the recruitment and best support the trainees at their institutions, in your opinion?
Um, well, one, I think I just want to take time to just thank all of the Black faculty that are at PWIs that are working beyond, what they are required to do, and the fact that they are taking on new mentees, or taking on people of color in general and mentoring them, and that is well beyond what their salary requires. So I thank whoever asked this question, and I definitely want to acknowledge the work that is already being done, and just how grateful I am, I think, for the Black faculty that were at my PWI that took time out of their schedule to pour into me, or to I will never forget Dr. Solomon, who I was not a mentee of hers. We were not even on the same campus, but she was the only Black woman neuroscientist there, and she definitely took time out to pour into me like no other. So I'm very appreciative of just the level of service and commitment that Black faculty have towards students. As far as what more could be done, I feel like I may be sort of like preaching to the choir when I say just continuing to advocate, I think, for not only for the students, but to advocate for themselves when it comes to funding. Like, if you are providing expertise, or you're lending to how to recruit for and retain students of color, then that's definitely something you should be compensated for, in my opinion. And I think that it's those types of strategies and skills and self-advocacy that are extremely helpful to students. So just continuing to just sort of give us like those little tidbits of how are you playing the game, especially when it comes to academia. I think we can all acknowledge that at some point, there is definitely a game that you have to play. So continue to put us up on game. How can we better navigate, these situations? How can we better market ourselves? I think outside of that, I think it would have been helpful to me if my Black faculty at my school sort of showed me like more how they set boundaries. So I think for me, it's just sort of those like critical conversations. I'm not exactly sure what avenues, but I see here, there's definitely, it seems like this would be like a great panel discussion or something to include, just so that you're continuing to pass down those gems, those pieces of wisdom that sort of helped you play the game that oftentimes is academia, or even getting into or breaking into a career.
I would say, in addition to that, one thing they can do is visit these HBCUs. We heard previously in this panel, people talk about how other schools attending their HBCU for either mock interviews or recruitment panels or so on afforded opportunities. That's how I learned about some of these summer research opportunities that I went to. And so I think Black faculty that are in a position to be able to travel to these HBCUs or any schools of that matter, and kind of learn what that culture is like, the relationships that are occurring between the faculty and the students, and the type of mentorship that's going on, you might be able to give game, as stated before, on what's going on at a graduate level, but also understand the ecosystem that exists at the undergraduate level, and what you can take from there and apply at your own institution, especially if you're going to recruit students at that said institution. You want to know kind of what support system they have had previously and what they might need moving forward. Because I think something that happens that isn't addressed a lot is that some of these institutions are able to recruit from these HBCUs, but they can't retain these students because they don't have these systems put in place, or the faculty, the Black faculty that exist at these institutions, their allosteric load is so high because they are having to mentor all of the Black students and no one else is helping them. And so I don't want to say it becomes a burden, but it slows down the system or cog that we have in terms of being able to increase the amount of Black neuroscience that's going on. So I think one thing that can be done, especially as we return to conferences and other things, is being able to increase that representation by visiting and meeting people where they're at.
Wow. I appreciate that input, and I'm sure the audience does too. So we're running a little bit out of time. We have so many questions that are popping up in the Q&A and in the chat, and we will be saving those questions and hopefully continuing this conversation on the Black and Neuro Slack. But here's my closing question for you panelists. Where do you see and hope your Black journey to neuro going? And what career do you hope to apply your neuroscience degree in? I know, Dr. Miles, you are a professor, you are doing it, you are in it. So, can still tell us more about it.
Sure. So I feel like when I go to explain like my career journey and its trajectory, it sounds like all over the place to some. But I think the last 2 years of my dissertation work was when I became really interested in science policy and sort of how I could apply my neuroscience training in the policy realm. There's, again, like neuroscience, there are so many, niches of work. And I wanted to capitalize on being trained as a behavioral neuroscientist and what that would look like in the policy realm. So I decided to throw my hat in the bucket of education policy. And honestly, I was able to just sort of tie in like my experience within my PWI, again, being the first Black woman graduate of a neuroscience program that has been in existence for 30 plus years. And I graduated in 2020. To me, that's unacceptable. And just to know that the recruitment level just simply wasn't there. So I really wanted to know, or I'm really curious to know, what are ways in which I can help to rebuild and sort of repair that pipeline through education policy. As far as my career trajectory, I would really love to be director of education at a museum because it just ties in like everything that I love to do. I feel like it would definitely tie in the behavioral sciences component and the fact that I'm interested in how consumers learn and do so through informal learning. It definitely would tie in sort of like the policy piece of, how are we designing implementation guides? How are we, expanding the way in which neurodiverse learners are able to gain new knowledge? So I'm definitely excited. Like I said, every time that Black and Neuro Week comes up, I'm always excited for these events because like it's so empowering to see people like Trayvon that are, in the thick of it in your program, to see people like Janelle that are, you're in undergrad, but you just already seem like so sure of where you want to go, what you want to do. It's truly inspiring. And I just hope that I can continue to like do the work and provide opportunities for people like you, like moving forward.
So we are running very short on time. If Trayvon and Janelle could give very quick answers, that would be lovely. But we could definitely continue. I will throw this question on Twitter, and I would love to see you two give a thorough answer.
Just quickly, one of my goals is to have my own lab, of course, but also to run a community center that's centered around science and representation in science. And so I want to be able to inspire kids that they can be scientists, even if it's not specific to neuroscience. As a child, I was interested in all works of science, and I just want to continue to kind of cultivate an environment where people could ask big questions and be creative and go seek answers.
In a very short and quick statement, I'm graduating this year, so I'm very, very excited about that. As of right now, my career trajectory is basically going for an MD PhD. In terms of the MD, I'm really interested in neurosurgery and neurosurgical techniques, so that's where I plan to go. But in the PhD side, I really do want to study Alzheimer's disease within the African American community, and more so the pathological factors and sociocultural factors that go into that.
Amazing. Well, I just want to thank all of our panelists for being here and being open to sharing your experiences. I also want to thank all of the audience for being here. And I hope that we can continue this conversation on the importance of HBCUs and sharing the HBCU journeys and also sharing our own unique experiences and kind of coming together as a community. So I want to thank everyone for being here, and I hope to see you at more Black and Neuro events this week.